Okay, so we're on to management tips now. So warming soils. One of the things with no-till is that the garden soil will be cooler because there is no activity to break up the soil. And so the soil is a buffer, so it's going to be cooler and it'll take a longer time to warm it up. So conventional tillage, like we said, warms up quicker because we broke that structure up, but we've also had a cost. We broke that structure up at a cost to warm it up in that case. So in exchange, we stir up the weed seed and warm it up, and then we get weeds faster and we lose some moisture when we do that. That's the give and take of this process. So you can solarize your soil with plastic layers to warm up spots, especially for your warm crops, such as the tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and okra. And in the states where it takes a while for the soil to naturally warm up all on its own, because I've spoken in South Dakota, they don't have enough degree days on their own to wait for the soil to slowly warm up and then plant the tomato and actually get tomatoes. So what they do commonly, very commonly, is they're solarizing. They are putting that plastic down and they're putting the weights down on it so it doesn't fly away or even have to pin it down with fabric pins, and they're cooking it. They're warming that area up. In the case with the garden from North Carolina State, they're using those black plastic buckets halfway planted down in the ground to help trap the heat and warm it up that way. But this is a tactic that will warm up so you can get more warmth going. There will be some bacteria that's killed. The question is, what about killing the bacteria? You can kill the bacteria on the surface. And so, but under that, you should be fine. But we're not going to be solarizing for a terribly long time, a month in the cases where things are really cool further north of us in zone 3, possibly. But, a few weeks will really warm your soils up. And you can check your soil by using a soil thermometer. And that's in our handout that I sent to you as well. So you can use black plastic, you can use clear plastic. It does not matter. There was a study done at Penn State about checking the color, and there was no appreciable difference between the color of plastic laid down and soil temperature. So this is a publication from Auburn University Extension in Alabama, and you can highlight this link and throw it in Google, and you'll get your publication. Now in Alabama, it's warm. It's a lot warmer than we are. And so it's warming up the soil, but in their case, they are controlling soil-borne disease. So the soil-borne disease on the surface layer that's problematic in a warm, moist, humid environment's getting cooked under solarization. So they have a different benefit from solarization. It'll help us too if there's a nematode problem, which is bacterial soil-borne disease at that soil level layer. But for us, we're wanting to warm it. This is also a strategy to smother out weeds. As weeds germinate and they get hot, they're going to cook. This is one way to try to get the bounce on top of bindweed, is to get it hot and cook the living daylights out of it. If you're using a colored plastic or silver plastic or something that does not allow light to penetrate it, then you will pull that plastic up from solarizing and you will see weeds going all over, distorting, twisting, white and yellow because they're needing the light to go through photosynthesis, and you're killing them off because you cooked them and they can't go through photosynthesis out. They respirate they respirate out at such a fast layer that they die. So in this case, that's a good thing. So that works. But that's one of the reasons why they use solarization in the deep south, is more for disease control. We can use it for disease control. We can use it for weed control, and we can use it to warm up the ground a little bit ahead. So if you warm up the ground ahead so you can plant your tomatoes, you need to put the wall of water or at least the milk jug over that tomato plant to keep it warm, because we get hammered with those late freezes that will always destroy tomatoes and peppers. So one thing's to solarize the soil and warm it up so you can plant it, but we also need to protect that seedling by planting that wall of water around it or put the milk jug on top. So don't forget to do that. Okay, so irrigation, and we talked about irrigation a little bit. It's good to lay out around drip irrigation in the planting rows and the blocks, like we've seen in a couple other examples from Georgia and North Carolina State. And it's good to lay that down and then put your mulch, whether it be a fabric or whether it be your layers of newspaper and your green and your brown. So the water has contact with the plant. So that's really good. You irrigate by your crop's needs. And I use a screwdriver test. Get a long screwdriver. A foot long screwdriver is even better. Phillips head's even the best because that pierces the ground the most efficient versus a regular head. Goes down and you can tell how much moisture is in that soil. And with no-till, there's going to be more available soil moisture because you haven't disturbed the soil. And then you may change your irrigation practices because you may have more available moisture, meaning you need to irrigate less. But that's just something you're going to have to learn to adjust and adapt to the needs of your crop. And so we always want to make sure that that irrigation is covered so you don't have water going up into the atmosphere and being lost, but we're pinpointing it, and that mulch is getting wet from the bottom, and that helps that rotting process as well. So then we're not allowing those mulch layers to dry out. We do have some comments here, so I'm going to keep looking. On the holes, I would plant your irrigation, your drip line, your soaker hose under the plastic. And when would you lay down the plastic? You want to play that plastic down. I would start putting it down in March. Let it warm up. Let it solarize, kill anything that's seed-wise on that soil. Put your layers down now, and we'll get it wet, and put your plastic down, put bricks on there or concrete blocks or something to keep it from blowing or pinning it down, but let it cook. Let it cook your weed seeds for you. Let it warm that area up. That's really good. So that's really helpful in that sense.
How deep does the irrigation stuff go?
Meaning how far the water travels?
No, I mean, how, if you're putting it down before you put your layers on.
Oh,
yeah.
You're going to, meaning in the sense that you are going to, in January, you're going to put your first layers down.
Okay.
And preferably using, you're putting it like we said, and then you're going to kind of make a little bit of a trench with your, to bury the water line, the soaker hose, or the drip line in that trench and then kind of cover it up again. Does that make sense?
Okay, that is the trench.
Yeah, so you're making your layer and then you're going to dig a trench and you're going to lay your line down into that trench. So. And if you're going to use plastic mulch and you're going to plant in it, because there are some people that do that, or weed barrier fabric, you need to make sure that you make a large enough size hole so the plant can grow and is not restricted. So as time goes on, like with the tomato, as the tomato gets bigger, you're going to be taking a little pocket knife out there and cutting that hole a little bit open and letting it grow open because you don't want to restrict it in that case. Because we use plastic mulch or the weed barrier fabric quite a bit with your vine crops, with your cucumbers and your melons, as well as your tomatoes and your peppers, your eggplant. So you can do that. It definitely works. You just have to make sure as those plants grow that you allow a little bit more hole, because remember, you have to have some carbon dioxide and oxygen exchange with the soil going. You can't totally smother it. And your irrigation line is going to be under that plastic. So it's really important as well. So that's good. This is a neat table that I borrowed from the University of Illinois Extension. And these are the critical times for various crops and when they should be watered. And this really boils it down to the bare basics. This is the time where they really are developing the produce part. So we've got the vegetative part, and once a plant goes from vegetative to productive, we really need to have that water available for them to develop naturally. In the case of tomatoes, to not get that ugly brown patch that's called blossom end rot, because that's inconsistent soil moisture. How many of you have eaten a bitter cucumber? That's from inconsistent moisture, where it grew, but there wasn't enough moisture in it, and it ended up turning sour tasting. So those are just, or really strong tasting cole crops, or they're also called crucifers. So that would be the broccoli, the cabbage, the kale, the kohlrabi, all those in there. So this is just a handy little chart to have in your arsenal of information. And this is from the University of Illinois Extension. And then weed control, pull out the weeds as soon as they come. And if you don't have a large garden, that works out fairly well. And if you catch things before they get out of control, it makes a lot of difference. And then as we do lasagna layers should be put on in the fall, and they are taller and deeper than what we're putting on in January. So that's important to remember, and we'll have a great diagram for it. And no-till gardening keeps the seed buried, so that bindweed, if you have bindweed seed, it's under all that layer that you built. And Kurt Scheel is a master gardener from North Platte. He's with us tonight. And we've talked a long time back and forth about a garden plot that just had horrible bindweed problems. And you got it knocked down with the help of, getting that cardboard layer down first and just layering and layering and layering and layering. So, he showed me a picture at the last class, seeing is believing. So it really does help. So pesticide use, if we're using the pesticides, the salt in the pesticide will drive away your earthworms. The pesticide residue on the crops and the harvest intervals have to be observed. So if you're applying a product and then you have to wait so many days for you to harvest, that's a factor that you'd need to think about. So that's a challenge. Crop rotation and encouraging beneficial insects will help control your disease as well as your insect problems, and what you plant in and around, including your herbs and your flowers, will attract those good insects that'll come and hunt for you. And be vigilant and scout for diseases, and do not compost any diseased plant materials. So if it's diseased, you can cut it off at the soil line and toss, in that case, the diseased tomato with the horrible case of blight. Don't bring it back in. Let it be gone. So that's good. There are times when you have to break the rule. If you have a weed problem or a pest problem so bad that the natural process is not getting it done, you may have to use an insecticide that's labeled for vegetables, or you may have to use Roundup and to knock out the weed problem. And it's usually our wonderful friend, the bindweed, and that happens. So we do have to break the rule every so often. But if nothing else, we're really reducing it. And that's important. Is we're reducing the necessity of using the plant pesticides. Okay, so late summer and fall. So we're getting towards the end. We're thinking about wrapping things up. And what we literally say in this case is we're putting the garden to bed and we're adding the extra blankets. So at the end of cropping, when you're done, cut off the stems and leave the roots unless they are diseased. Compost the plant tops if they are not diseased, or in the case like the cabbage leaves, leave the bottom base leaves. They will serve as a good host for good insects. And start the lasagna layers in the cleared areas. Purslane, some people eat purslane, and it is an ethnic choice. Some people like to eat it in salads, fresh, or they will stir fry it. I've seen people stir fry purslane. So if you don't put pesticide on it, you can eat it. Some people eat dandelion greens. So, so that's kind of all in the eye of the beholder. Do you let old tomato roots go and not pull it out? Yes, you let them rot. You let your tomato roots rot. And so that works out pretty good. And as you're watering with drip irrigation, that's helping those. They're going to, once you cut the top off of it, it's going to die and it's going to start decomposing anyway. So that'll be okay. Because the tomato roots on a big established tomato plant are quite established, are quite massive.
What about green beans?
Okay, we got a question on green beans. What about the green beans?
Would you let those roots stay in the soil?
I would let the roots stay in the soil. Green beans and peas. Beans and peas are in the Fabaceae family, which are the legumes, which are related to alfalfa. They're also in the same family, and they are nitrogen fixers. So let them rot. Let them rot. They will drop down extra nitrogen. They will feed nitrogen. So I had purslane all over the garden, but I've left it and pulled it out. Not sure what I should do with it. You can pull it out, absolutely. If it doesn't bloom and go to seed, it's a fairly easy one to get rid of. So that's not a killer. The killer is the bindweed. And some of your mallows that have very persistent roots that are tough to get rid of. So here's the lasagna. Have you ever heard of lasagna composting? Some of you have heard about it and have brought it up. And so we're going to talk about lasagna. We're doing this in late fall or early fall, late summer. So we're going to add a 6-inch layer of cardboard. So we're going to make a heavier layer because this is going to rot over summer, fall, winter. So as things are finishing up in the garden and you're ready to make the lasagna layer, this is what you do. So a 6-inch layer of cardboard or end of newspaper wet, and then a 2-inch layer of green, sprinkle a layer of meal, which whether it's cottonseed or soybean meal, which are byproducts. You can buy soybean meal as a byproduct, and also blood meal. You can buy blood meal and scatter that in, and then add a 2-inch layer of brown, which would be leaves, hay, straw, pine needles, all that. And then you would, after that, add a layer of soil on top to put the weight on, and you're going to keep going. So this is what it looks like. In this case, this is from Clemson. Clemson is in South Carolina, the land-grant university in South Carolina. So in this case, instead of the cardboard, they're using branches. And so they're using tree branches, small ones that lay fairly flat, and that breaks down as well. And so it shows the dried leaves, hay, newspaper, sawdust.
Is this adjusted any for rainfall zone? I mean, we get 17 inches and they get 40.
Oh yeah, they get 40. And so that's why in this case, I wouldn't put the branches in unless you had a lot of moisture. So remember, we're going to always add moisture, but we're also pulling up drip irrigation before we plant this. And it should be wet, and we'll add water to it as we go on. So we're going to constantly be adding some water and helping it kick in. As it gets hot and it's wet, it'll be doing its cooking process.
6 inches of hardwood. That's pretty thick.
And this looks like it's, add all those up, that's at least 10 inches.
It gets tall. It gets tall.
Yeah.
And so you start with your cardboard and then the newspaper.
Boxes with the red or blue or whatever.
So break down your cardboard boxes, and do a layer of cardboard box. And then the rest is newsprint, whether it be single layer or shredded, and you get it wet. And yeah, it's going to have a lot there, but that's really suffocating any weeds out as well. So that'll work.
Did you use all cardboard?
I wouldn't use all of cardboard. I would mix it. So one layer cardboard and the rest is newspaper print or shredded or whole.
See, we're pulling up the irrigation.
Yeah, you pull up your irrigation line and then store it because an irrigation line, especially soaker hoses, rot in the ground and they will break off. A cool thing about burying your soaker hose during the year is it doesn't allow the sun to degrade it. And the sun will kill a soaker hose and it just snaps apart real easy. So you're protecting the soaker hose or your drip irrigation from your from the sun, the degradation from the sun. So this will work. So one layer of cardboard and then the newsprint, and then add up. And you're going to be adding moisture to all this to activate it. So we get a lot of corn husks from neighboring farm, but the farmer doesn't rotate his crops at all. So can we assume he is probably using pesticides in his cornfields and not using the husks as a brown layer? Yes, I would assume that is true. I would assume that they are using pesticides. Would this method help any of my Bermuda grass problem in his garden? Yes, it would. It would. It definitely would. Solarizing would definitely help as well. But this is a deeper one. The lasagna layer is a deeper one, a thicker one, and it definitely would help on controlling Bermuda grass, which is another bad one. If you have Bermuda grass, heaven forbid, in a garden. And that's definitely a problem in the deep south, as Bermuda grass gets away from you down there. So you think it's bad enough here, it grows all over the place deep in the south. So make sure. I assume the dust would be from non-treated wood. That is correct. We talked about we need to add the moisture to it. Remember, this is really composting on top of the garden instead of composting in a bin. So we're going to constantly get it wet. We're going to let it rot and it's going to do its thing. So we're going to add moisture to it. And so on top of your lasagna layer, because you've got your drip line taken out, you put your lasagna layer on, then you can start scattering your cover crop on top of it. So you have growth and breakdown from the bottom, and you have growth and breakdown from the top. And this is where you can scatter oats, turnips, and rye in the summer, late summer after you've finished up. Say you're done with the green beans. Cut the green beans off the base, scatter the plant material out, or collect it and make your lasagna layer. And then you're going to have a wet seed bed that you're going to scatter oats in and let the oats grow up. Great things happen with this because we're going to irrigate it to help it germinate and then allow the cover crops to grow and keep on growing. And what that does is it's breaking down that lasagna layer and helping it get settled for the winter so it doesn't blow. So there's wind conservation there. So we're reducing the chance for everything blowing away. It's more moisture going. And there's another layer of green manure on top. because you have your brown, you have your green, your brown, or your brown, your green, and your soil. Well, you got a layer of soil on top. We're going to broadcast seed into that, and it's going to take off, and their roots will penetrate down into that. So it'll break it all down again. So this is taking it to another whole level of doing that. And so what's that?
Oats is the best.
Oats is really good. Oats are cheap. Yes.
I'm gonna talk about that, the cover crop there, that living root in the soil,
Mhm.
which is very beneficial to microorganisms in the
Mhm.
soil.
You want
They love that. It really helps the soil health.
the roots are really good, and we'd like to have some roots growing going into the fall. Some of them will buffer and will stay alive in the winter. So that works good. Winter wheat will work if you have winter wheat, if you wanted to do that too, and treat it as such. But the roots and the microbes off the roots are good. And the soil where there's a lot of microbes, that's all a really symbiotic, beneficial relationship. And so whoever thought you got into organic chemistry and Master Gardener class, so you got some organic chemistry in tonight too. So
So how do you kill the winter wheat in the spring?
you cut it. You can cut it, yeah, because then you don't want it to go to head. So you can cut it off. So here are two publications that I wanted to show you. The first picture is a picture from the University of Georgia, where they're using some type of radish and where that's growing. And you can see that it's literally covering everything, just green as a gourd. And you can see where the plants were left in the garden. They did not cut the plant at the soil line. They left them up, right? But you can cut them off. The other one that's very good is this one from Iowa State. This is a better management one for us, but it's good for you to look and see the practices from the different states. A lot of parallels that are very good, but always err towards the one from Iowa State. But it's always good reading. And your reading also counts for your Master Gardener education hours. So if you want to further read on all the publications that I embed in here, that also counts for your education. So I've actually given you lots of extra homework. If you want to read this stuff, it's extra things that you can count for your time.
Just keep track of our hours.
Just keep track of your hours above and beyond the class. And then the fall leaves, and you can shred your leaves. And it's, the more you shred them into fine, you increase the surface area when you shred those, and then you can make a light covering. Just scatter them out and they'll fall in within the cover crop and they'll be fine. So you can also lightly scatter out hay or straw if you want to make a final layer. And so here's a picture of kale where they put the leaf layer on top. So that's kind of cool. Kale is also used as an ornamental in the winter as well. So, but this is using those shredded leaves as that mulch on the final G1. This is a deep layer. What we're talking about is literally sprinkling on top, and it'll all kind of fall in together and rot down. So the references I used are all extension publications, and you can go up here. These are in blue highlighted. So if I want to go look at this lasagna mulching, I can literally click on this link from Oregon State Extension and you can pull it up. So there's information from Oregon State, which is really good. They're just a great university on vegetable production. Cornell University in upstate New York, University of Minnesota, South Dakota State, we talked about weed control, and then work less and grow more. This is University of California Extension with the Master Gardeners in their program as well. So lots of great resources to share and to learn from. And then here's my contact information here in the Extension office here in North Platte. for you. And are there any questions at this point? Okay, I'm going to stop the share. And then I'm going to just get to talk with all of you in person. And I like doing that better because we get away from that darn PowerPoint. So it does its job for what we need it to, but we really need to get out of this screen with the PowerPoint and look at something else for once. So. All right.
My one takeaway from this is it looks like to do an excellent job to start completely over. Find a bare spot of ground, dig 6 feet in the ground, start layering. And then by next year, you might have an excellent garden. Does that not sound unthinkable or what? I don't know.
Oh, that is very realistic. That is very realistic. It'll start to make changes. And especially after the first year, you'll start to see some changes the first year. And once you get to the second and third, it's amazing what you'll see what happens. Because the soil quality, and if you want to take a shovel or a spade and just see what the soil is like prior to doing this, and then a year later, you'll see how amazing the organic matter and the soil drainage ability and the texture of the soil has changed. It's really amazing.
Because I have a underground problem. Where I live, they deposited that white rock. So can you understand that?
Yes.
I have to dig at least 6 inches down before I can get out of that white rock. So
Yes.
That's why I'm saying that.
Yes, white rock is the enemy. And not really, it was something that was done in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and people thought it was wonderful, and it just turned into a nightmare for anyone who inherited property that you got that whole layer you got to get rid of. So
That's right.
I have this handout, it's my garden planning worksheet that's in front of you. And this is a super easy one to look at. And it shows you the members of the common vegetable families. So you don't have to guess who is related to who now. We've talked about some of our relatives and the families and who are the relatives and who are the in-laws and the outlaws and who brings in the pests insect-wise and who brings in the diseases. So Alliaceae, if you think of allium or the lily family as the chives, garlics, leeks, and onions, makes sense, right? If you think of an allium bulb, they have a bulb and you think, oh, it looks like an onion. Well, guess what? It's a cousin. So that tells you a little bit. Your curcubited, I can't even speak today. Your cucurbits are your melons and pumpkins and cucumbers and squash. Your crucifers or your cole crops. We'll hear about cole crops, K-O-L-E, is your broccoli, Brussels cabbage. Oh, thank you. ACE, this is your bean and pea family. This is your good family. They feed your nutrients. So they're very valuable to you. So they lay down nitrogen. This is a good plant family to have after a heavy feeding family. We have the Poaceae, our corn, and it's a monocot, meaning it has parallel leaf veins, and you cannot split the seed. It's a single seed piece, does not split in two naturally. The Chenopodiaceae, this is the goosefoot family. This is the beet. This is where the beets come in. So Swiss chard and spinach, they're relatives. And then your Solanaceae family. How many of you know what nightshade is? This is the nightshade family. And if you want to think about historical reference, Thomas Jefferson was quite a gardener and a botanist, along with his many other skills. And he was actually a very renowned horticulturalist. And he brought tomatoes to the United States from France in his diplomatic work, and he was planting tomatoes in the garden at Monticello. And the colonists were really concerned what he was doing because they said, that looks like nightshade. Well, guess what? It's a cousin. It's a relative. And this one was something they could eat, whereas nightshade was poisonous. So he had a very good gourmet taste, and he brought things from the old world to the new, and he introduced tomatoes to the Tidewater region of Virginia. And then you have your Apiaceae, or your umbrella family. So think about your umbrellas, such as dill and fennel, and your carrots. They have a really lacy type of foliage. And your parsnips and your parsleys, they're all together. So think about them as the umbrellas. This is a 3-year rotation that I have in front of you. And this has a rotation between heavy feeders, moderate feeders, and low feeders. And so look at our high feeders. A lot of our really popular crops are high feeding families. And so we want to put our beans and our peas behind some of these crops to help replenish the soil naturally, or at least put them in between heavy feeding crops. So maybe you have your tomatoes and your peppers together, and you plant your beans the next year in that spot because, oh, by the way, we're going to put cucumbers in that spot the next year. You're following the correct rotation, but at least you have a feeding crop in between 2 heavy feeders, a replenishing crop in between 2 heavy eaters. So you got to help rebuild the soil, and that's one way to do that naturally. So that's a good one. The soil temperature with the soil thermometer here. Soil thermometers are about $10 at the local hardware store or bought online. It is very handy to have. This one has the face dial that tells you the soil temperature you need for each crop. And that's a lifesaver in a lot of ways in vegetable gardening. We tend to plant things way too early when the soil is too cool. So this is one thing that you can test when you solarize the ground to warm it up. You need to check the soil temperature on the edge where you have it solarized, shove that soil thermometer in, check and see how that soil temperature is climbing. So what we do is we take one location and we're going to shove that thermometer in at the same time of day for 4 consecutive days. And we're going to check the temperature. And if that temperature is pretty consistent, maybe a few degrees off, then that's a good reading. So that's the easy way to use your soil thermometer. Page 2 talks a little bit more about your families with a little bit better explanation. So that's what's here. And so I'll let you digest that information from Penn State. Our third page is a table from Oregon State University again, and it has the temperatures for germination of different crops, where you have your minimum and your ideal. And so this is what catches us into trouble when we plant those tomatoes in too cool of soils. We can stunt a crop of transplants such as cucumbers. Even you can buy cucumber transplants now. You don't have to direct seed. You plant that in a cool soil, you will stunt that plant and it'll never really produce to its full potential. So either you allow the ground to naturally warm up or you can solarize it and watch your reading and then you can plant. Yes.
What temperature did the seedling mats heat up to?
Gosh. To start your seedlings,
You
I-
can plug them in, there's no setting. on it.
Yeah, I think they go up to 15 degrees extra to warm them up. They give you a 15-degree bounce in the sense of warming it up faster. I need to look at them too, because there is no, like you said, you plug them in and that's it. So they're calibrated already, but
That light, that didn't increase it.
it's a mat that is if you're going to start, it's like a heating pad under your plant, your flats of plants that you're starting indoors. So usually it's about a 15-degree benefit. So this helps you quite a bit. And we can also talk about, if people want to learn, about counting your days backwards based off of your average last soil freeze date. So, or last freeze date. This next sheet is a worksheet, so you can build your own rotation. This is blank. This is based off of the Penn State publication, has the families, and then you can write in your boxes and show your rotations. And then the last one here, the colorful one, is our publication from Colorado State Extension, where I took the tables and I put them together. And this shows us the spacing for different vegetables here on our right side. And it shows you how you can plant into a block. Carrots and radishes and onions work great planted in a block. Then you cover them with straw or a little bit of hay. And so you can plant everything really, really compacted together. And so it shows you how to do that in this example. So it's a really handy one as well. And if you want to plant by blocks, by crop, this is a garden diagram that Colorado State has put together that shows you how to, where you put your walkways in. So your walkways, you can put cardboard over and you can just walk over the cardboard so you know where your walkways are. So you can really benefit from that. And then, you know, what you can put in. So 5 rows, 6 by 6, for example, leeks, 3 rows of leeks that are 6 by 6. So you can make this very compact in a very large area, or you can put this down into a very small space, whether it's an in-ground garden or if it's a small raised bed. So this is utilizing the soil space that you've got to the best of your ability. And you notice that everything is color coded, so you could rotate. You wouldn't have to rotate in a clockwise or counterclockwise motion. You could rotate down or you could rotate up. These are all different practices that are perfect for getting rid of some potential insect problems, some disease problems, utilizing your space to the absolute best of your ability, whether you are a small garden spot or if you're a large one. And this handout, when I send it out on email, the links are active in the blue, so you can click on them and you can see them. So are there any questions? And I do see the chat box up here. How much warmer does the ground need to be to plant seedlings rather than seeds? It depends on the crop. This is the optimal range for planting or the minimum. So you always need to follow the minimum, and that's good. If you follow the Farmer's Almanac, they set that every year, and it is run by the tides. If you follow the tides and the atmosphere, it's generally pretty darn close to the correct soil temperature. So there's a reason why the Farmer's Almanac's a good tool as well. So if you don't have room to move tomatoes each year, what can you do to replace soil around roots? If you're planting just tomatoes, I would choose to have a separate container such as a round mineral lick tub. You can buy livestock mineral in and have it where you can bounce back and forth. So you're moving that tomato out 1 year at least and planting it into a tub garden and then moving it back into the spot. So you at least have one move back and forth. That would be the best thing to do. Because we do work with people that only have, we do have challenges with that. And we do have challenges with soil pH. And as you go further west and into the panhandle, our soil pH will go up. And there is a relationship where there is deficiency of other micronutrients, including iron, copper, manganese, zinc, and molybdenum in general. So there is soil amendment to change the soil pH down that is optimal too. But that's a whole nother topic, but I can send that information out as well. Any other questions in person? Here in the room or online? I thank you for sticking with me. It's 8:37. We covered a lot of ground in 2 hours, including one bathroom break, which was very much needed. Any questions that you may have?
Oh, I learned a lot tonight.
It's a lot to absorb. There's a lot to absorb. And one of the things I wanted to show you in this class is there's so many fields of knowledge and learning that have to interconnect to make something like no-till gardening work. You have the chemistry, you have the physics, you have irrigation, you have entomology, you have botany, you have plant pathology. What else? What else are we talking about? All these, and that's not even
Soil fertility.
yeah, you're talking about soil structure, fertility. We're talking about weather. We're talking about use of solar power. There's all kinds of things come in. We just can't learn in a vacuum. So much going on, so many different directions that make this happen.
Does it mean carrots planted on a 3-inch center?
So you have a center and you're spacing 3, your carrot plant is in the center and then 3 inches out. So going 3 inches in the different directions. So here's your center. And so you're going to go 3 inches this way, this way, this way, this way. So
Each star is a.
yeah, each star is a carrot. So there's 3 inches between each star, if that makes sense in that diagram. So you can string them along. So that's a good comment. You can scatter your seed out and then selectively thin out to where you got 3. You have that star and it's going to be 3 inches from every direction. So you can do that. Any other questions, comments? And this will be recorded. I will record this for you all, and so you will be good to go. And then we will get it out to you. So we will also have one web page that we will post all the handouts on. And that was in the link tonight, but I tried to send information out to you and it bounced several emails back because I sent file sizes that were too big. So anyway, so that is it for tonight, and we will see you next Tuesday. Stay warm tomorrow. It sounds like the weather's gonna get icky. So please be safe in your travels and stay healthy, and we'll see you all next week.